All right, lesson 4.5. I'm going to skip the exponent rules because we don't really need those for this lesson. Okay, so we are going to graph with fractional exponents. And there are going to be six different kinds of graphs. You might see a parabola. You might see a half parabola. You might see a fishing pole. You might see a snake, a lazy snake. And before I write down the last one, let me go back and sketch what you are going to get. So this is obviously a parabola. This would be half a parabola. That's a fishing pole. Here's a snake. Here's a lazy snake. And then the last one, I'm going to call it a bird, which is like this, because I used to draw my birds like that when I was little. And 0, 0 is going to be on all of these graphs. Okay. Now hints, they're not really hints, they're more of like steps. So step number 1, you are going to look at the fraction. If the fraction is greater than 1, then you're going to go up. If the fraction is less than 1, you're going to go over. So this is what I mean by up and over. This would be up, this would be over. Step number 2, you look at the denominator. If the denominator is even, then you are done with your graph. If your denominator is odd, then you go to step 3. All right, if you do have to go to step 3, then you're going to look at the numerator. If the numerator is even, then you're going to reflect whatever's in the first quadrant into the second quadrant. And if your numerator is odd, you're going to rotate whatever is in the first quadrant down to the third quadrant. Okay, so let me rip this off because we might have to refer back to it. Okay, so first we're going to sketch a graph. So on the first one, my exponent is 3/4. So I have to go back and look at my steps here. Okay, so my fraction is less than 1. So I'm going to go over in the first quadrant. Now look at the denominator. The denominator is even, so I'm done with my graph. So that's all for number 1. Okay, number 2, my fraction is 5/4. So this time my fraction is greater than 1. So I'm going to go up in the first quadrant. Step number 2, look at my denominator. My denominator is even, so I am also done with that graph. That's all I have to do on 1 and 2. Okay, number 3, my fraction is 1/3. That's less than 1. So I'm going to go over. My denominator is odd this time, so I have to go to step number 3. Step number 3 tells me I have to now look at the numerator. The numerator is odd, so I'm going to rotate. So this is going to stay there, but the other part is going to rotate down into the third quadrant. So when you rotate, you're going to be in quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. When you reflect, you're going to be in quadrant 2 and quadrant, whoops, that's not right. You're going to be in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. Okay, number 4, my fraction is 4/3. My fraction is greater than 1, so I'm going to go up. My denominator is odd, so I'm going to go to step number 3. Now look at my numerator. My numerator is even, so I'm going to reflect. So I should be in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. So this is going to reflect over to there. Okay. Number 5, my fraction is 4/5. It is less than 1, so I'm going to go over in the first quadrant. My denominator is odd, so I'm going to go to step number 3. Then I look at my numerator, which is even, so I'm going to reflect. So I already have something in quadrant 1. I'm going to reflect that over into quadrant number 2. Okay, number 6, my fraction is greater than 1, so I'm going to go up in the first quadrant. My denominator is odd, so I'm going to go to step number 3. My numerator is also odd, so I'm going to rotate. So I'm going to end up with a graph in quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. This is going to rotate down in quadrant 3. So that's the graphing. If you turn the page, now we're getting into solving. And I'm going to skip 7 and 8. Okay, now right here it says beware. And what I mean by that is when you have a fractional exponent, you have to be sure to sketch a graph because it might give you wrong solutions if you just type it in your calculator. So the calculator is only as good as the person using it. It will not always give you the correct solutions. All right, let's see. Let's go ahead and do 10 and 12. Let's forget about these. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. My steps are right up here, but all you have to really do is just consider solving your equation like you normally would solve for x. So on number 10, the first thing you want to do is divide over the -3. So we get x to the 1/2 equals 4. Once you get an x and an exponent, you're going to sketch a graph because that's going to tell you how many solutions you're going to have. You have two options. You're either going to have 0 solutions, 1 solution, or 2 solutions. Okay, so my exponent is 1/2. That's where I have to look at this paper again. So since my fraction is less than 1, I'm going to go over in the first quadrant. My denominator is even, which means I am done with my graph. Well, now I have this number. I'm kind of looking for the intersection. So sketching, again, tells you how many solutions you're going to have. And then how many solutions comes from the intersection. This is a y value. I don't care that it's a 4. I only care that it's a positive. So the horizontal line is going to be up here somewhere, which means I'm going to have 1 solution. So this just tells us how many solutions we have. To get our answer, I'm going to take the reciprocal. So since that's 1/2, I'm going to square it to both sides. That cancels out, and 4 squared is 16. So x is 16. So it's like I'm saying this ordered pair is 16/4. Now I don't need to write that, but that's what that means. All right, moving on to number 12. So first I need to divide over the 2. And then also I want to change this to exponential form. So this is going to be x to the 1/5. And this is a calculator question, so you're allowed to use a calculator. So if you take -3.4 divided by 2, we get -1.7. Okay, well since I have x and an exponent, I'm now going to sketch a graph because I have to figure out how many solutions I'm going to get. All right, so my fraction is 1/5. Since my fraction is less than 1, I'm going to go over. Step number 2, look at my denominator. Since it's odd, I go to step number 3. And then step number 3, I look at my numerator. Since it's odd, I'm going to rotate. Now I look at the number that's by itself. That's the y value. So I'm either going to have a horizontal line above the x-axis or below it. Since it's a negative, it's going to be below it somewhere. I'm going to get one solution. So to get my one solution, I'm going to take my exponent, I'm going to do the reciprocal to the 5th power. That cancels out. All I have to do now is put that in my calculator. Negative 1.7 to the 5th power is negative 14.198. 3 decimal places is all I need to see. Okay, moving on to the last page here. Okay, so I want to first of all move the 2 and the 3 over. First I'm going to add over the 2. The next thing I want to do is divide over the 3. And I'm going to keep it as 1/3 because I never want to truncate or round until the very end. Okay, from here I'm going to sketch a graph. Once I get x and an exponent, I'm going to sketch a graph. My fraction is 6/5. That's bigger than 1, so I'm going to go up in the first quadrant. My denominator is odd, so I keep going to step number 3. Step number 3, I look at my numerator. Since it is even, I reflect. And now I look at my y value. My y value is positive. It's going to be up here somewhere. On this one, I'm actually going to get 2 answers. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get rid of my 6/5. I'm going to do the reciprocal. That cancels out. It's going to be positive and negative something. So in my calculator, I'm going to take 1/3, you have to make sure your fraction is in parentheses, to the power of 5 divided by 6. So 0.4003, I'm going to go up 4 decimal places this time. 0.4003. All right, number 14. So first I'm going to subtract over the 4, but I'm also going to change that. So I get negative 2x to the 7/8, and then if I subtract 4, I get 6. Next thing I want to do is divide over the negative 2. It's going to give me negative 3. And now that I have an x and an exponent, I'm going to sketch a graph. My exponent is less than 1, so I'm going to go over. My denominator is even, so I'm done with my graph. But now I have to look at the y value. It's negative. It's going to be down here somewhere. Since they don't intersect, my answer would be no solution. Now, if I were to put this in my calculator, let's say we didn't sketch a graph. Let's say I just went ahead and did what I did on the others. If I put negative 3 to the 8/7 power, it actually gives me an answer. That's why at the beginning, when I filled in those blanks, it said that it's not always going to give you the correct solutions. So sketching a graph tells us there's actually no solution. Because whenever you're working with radicals or fractional exponents, your calculator doesn't recognize stuff like that. It's confusing. So just sketch a graph and all is good. Okay, the last two, they are different from the rest, but they are similar to each other. So I'm going to actually do both of them. I'm going to look at 16 first because I recognize something. I can automatically say that this is no solution. And the reason I know that is because if I take the square root of any number, I can't get a negative number back. So my answer is no solution on that one. So the square root of some number is never negative, so no solution. That one was easy. Okay, now on here, I have to solve for x. So what I need to do is I need to get rid of my square root. I have more than just an x underneath it like I did back up here on 14. So I can't really do 15 like I did on 14. So to get rid of my square root, I'm going to square both sides. That cancels. I get x plus 1 equals x minus 1 squared. Well, now I'm going to have to FOIL that out. To FOIL that out, I get x squared minus x plus 1. If I combine that, I get x squared minus 2x plus 1, and then I'm just going to bring this down. Now I'm solving for x, so this one is completely different from the others. Because now what I want to do is, since I have an x squared and an x, this is kind of like now a problem that we've done before when I had an x squared and x and a number. To solve, I have to get everything on one side. If I move this over to here, it's negative 3x, and then my 1's cancel. So what I'm going to have to do now is factor, because we can't work backwards anymore. So whenever you have an x squared and an x, you got to factor. I'm going to take out an x. That's as much as I can factor. Now I'm going to solve. I'm going to get one answer here and one answer here. I get 0 and positive 3. Now we're going to have to check our answers, because whenever you have a square root or any kind of radical in your answer or your question, you have to check your answer, because it might be something like this situation. So let's go back up to our original problem. Let's say x is 0. So 0 plus 1 is 1, and then 0 minus 1 is negative 1. The square root of 1 is not negative 1, because I'm looking for the principal solution. The principal solution is the first answer you should get. If I take the square root of 1, technically I do get positive and negative 1, but I'm looking for the principal solution. So this is a false statement. So 0 is actually not a solution. That is called extraneous. Now I'm going to try 3 and see if that works. So if I put 3 there, I get 3 plus 1, which is 4. And then if I put 3 there, 3 minus 1 is 2. The square root of 4 is 2. And 2 does equal 2. That's a true statement. So 3 is my only answer on that one. So in summary, on these two at the bottom, if the square root of something equals a negative number, that is no solution. All right, so that is 4, 5.